Hungary has stepped into the spotlight of Europe's high-stakes energy battle. In Budapest, Prime Minister Viktor Orban stood beside U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, celebrating a pivotal victory. Washington has granted Hungary an exemption, allowing it to continue tapping Russian gas and oil, a lifeline amid a continent racked by energy tensions. The move sends ripples across Europe, underscoring Hungary's bold assertion of its national interests in the face of global pressure. Orban framed the exemption as nothing short of essential. By coupling U.S. approval with existing agreements on oil, gas, and nuclear power, Hungary secures a stable energy supply and safeguards prices for both households and industry. For Orban, it is a triumph that strengthens national sovereignty while asserting Hungary's influence in a continent grappling with energy uncertainty.
Since last January, 17 American investment decisions were made in Hungary. This is a decade-long record. Hungarians can once again travel to the United States without a visa. We also thank the Foreign Minister for this. Hungary has been invited to the newly established Peace Council, whose inaugural meeting will be held this week, perhaps on Thursday, in America, in Washington, where I will personally represent Hungary. And we have successfully concluded crucial agreements in the energy sector. This encompasses crude oil, natural gas, and nuclear power generation. And these agreements are in conjunction with the specific exemption granted to Hungary by the President of the United States, which allows for the continued use of Russian gas and oil within Hungary. All of these elements, when taken together, contribute significantly to ensuring that Hungary continues to remain secure in terms of its energy supply, and that we are capable of providing both residential households and industrial sectors with energy that is, in international comparison, exceptionally affordable. And we naturally discussed the Kuk-Manahopo, the Serbian refinery, the company called NIS, and the conditions under which MOL could acquire it. No? As for my part, I assured Foreign Minister Rubio that Hungary continues to support it, regardless of any European conflicts it may entail.
The announcement comes amid broader European efforts to curb reliance on Russian energy. Hungary and Slovakia have both opposed recent EU measures targeting Russian gas imports, arguing that such policies threaten their domestic stability. Budapest has signaled it could challenge the EU's decision in European courts. Complicating matters further is the Druzhba pipeline, a major conduit of Russian oil into Central Europe. Hungarian officials say Ukraine has halted Russian oil flows through the pipeline, rejecting claims that the stoppage is merely technical. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó alleges the move was a deliberate political decision by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to Budapest, the pipeline is operational, and the disruption is intended to exert pressure ahead of Hungary's upcoming parliamentary elections. Kyiv has not accepted those accusations. However, the dispute underscores how energy infrastructure has become entangled with political leverage in the wider regional conflict.
A new front in Europe's energy war is opening, and this time it's political. Hungary is accusing Ukraine of turning off the oil tap deliberately. At the center of the storm, the Druzhba pipeline, election season in Budapest, and a deepening rift inside the European Union. What began as a war in Ukraine is now colliding with domestic politics hundreds of miles away. A strategic artery of steel beneath Europe's soil, a nation on edge before a pivotal vote, and now an explosive accusation of political sabotage. Hungary claims Ukraine has choked off Russian oil flowing through the Druzhba pipeline, insisting the shutdown is no mere technical glitch. In Budapest's telling, it's a calculated strike, one aimed at shaking Hungary's domestic stability at the worst possible moment. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó alleges that President Volodymyr Zelensky deliberately blocked the restart of crude supplies even though the pipeline is set to be fully operational. The charge is stark. Kyiv is weaponizing energy transit to tighten the screws on Hungary just weeks before parliamentary elections on April 12th. Energy, politics, power. colliding in a high-stakes showdown with consequences far beyond the pipeline itself. The Druzhba pipeline, one of the largest and oldest oil transit routes in Europe, carries Russian crude across Ukrainian territory into Central Europe. For Hungary, it remains a critical supply artery. Any disruption sends shockwaves through domestic energy planning. Szijjártó went further. He accused Ukraine of interfering in Hungary's internal politics, suggesting the disruption could benefit the opposition TISA party against Prime Minister Viktor Orban's ruling Fidesz party. The charge: foreign influence through energy leverage. Kyiv has not publicly confirmed the political intent alleged by Budapest, but the tension comes amid broader disagreements between Hungary and Ukraine over sanctions policy and continued reliance on Russian energy. Last week, Prime Minister Viktor Orban escalated rhetoric at an anti-war rally, accusing Ukraine of undermining Hungary's national interests by pushing Budapest to abandon Russian energy imports. Hungary has consistently resisted full decoupling from Russian oil and gas, arguing it would destabilize its economy.
My question, Prime Minister, is whether you deem this particular decision to be sufficient, or if there is perhaps any other form of support or assistance available for the Hungarians in Transcarpathia. And furthermore, could this specific decision potentially influence President Zelensky's possible visit to Hungary? Yes.
Of course, of course.
Absolutely, yes. That's all there is to it. The peace talks are failing.
Excuse me, the Szent Gotthártiák are famously well-mannered. I thought you wouldn't put it so harshly as I did, but the real issue is not about banning those who are carrying out the conscription, but rather the Ukrainian president. This is a legitimate and very sensible point. Yes, now let's discuss this a little and its broader context as well. First of all, let's send our warmest greetings to the Hungarians in Transcarpathia, who are currently in a very difficult situation.
I might have inflammation here.
We don't publicize it much because they're already harassed quite enough there, but every single Hungarian soldier who dies on the Ukrainian front can count on the Hungarian state's assistance, not merely in words. We seek out their families, and wherever we can, we provide help to everyone, but we don't make a big deal out of it. But there are these spectacular deaths, because there are those who die on the front lines in battle, but there's also violence due to forced conscription or enlistment that completely ignores one's health condition. These people don't die on the front, but even before that, one is beaten to death like the first victim, and the other was taken by that. We know what we're talking about. And this cannot be tolerated silently. Peter Szijjártó has a clear mandate to keep this issue on the agenda in Brussels. Here at home, we are dealing with this. We are recording everything. We know everything. We are documenting everything, and everything will have its consequences in due time, because everything has its appointed time. It was a long time ago when we appeared to be fools and allowed them to push us around. That's over, and everyone had better remember that. Our neighbors too, especially towards Ukraine. But we are definitely in a different world since 2010. Well, however, the point you raised in your opening remarks regarding how precisely and in what manner we ought to be developing our ties with the Ukrainians, beyond just the matter of compulsory military service, that is truly a very crucial question. Now my position is that Ukrainians should not be allowed into the European Union. And I tell Hungarians that we shouldn't want to be in any military or economic alliance with them, because that will cause trouble, two kinds of trouble. The first is they're pulling us into war. And this is true even if a peace deal is made. Because who guarantees that on that 1,200-kilometer long front line, if there's peace now, in 1 or 2 years, there won't be war again, just like this? Nobody can guarantee that. And if they become members, they will drag us into the war. This is what Mr. Weber is talking about. It's impossible for a European Union member state to be attacked or get into a military conflict and the others just watch. No. Everyone is moving. Money is flowing, soldiers are going, weapons are being sent. Therefore, Ukrainians must not be allowed into the European Union for the foreseeable future because they pose a continuous threat of war to us, as a Russian-Ukrainian conflict could arise again at any time, and we would also be drawn into this conflict. We have absolutely nothing to do with this. That's the first point. The second is, if we let the Ukrainians in, our farmers and small-scale producers are already struggling because their products, which are produced under much looser regulations, are of poorer quality but cheaper. And they already pose a challenge to Hungarian agriculture. And so we must establish some kind of cooperation with the Ukrainians that benefits both them and us. Not something that only benefits them, destroying us, no, that's not it, but something that benefits both of us. This is what I call a strategic partnership. We will then reach an agreement, but not about membership, that's a completely different matter, but about how we will trade and how investments will be made. Calmly, one by one, without creating an obligation that would drag us along with them into a war against Russia. This must not be allowed. Therefore, we must cooperate with the Ukrainians, but there can be no talk of their membership. This is the first point. The second point is that the Ukrainians must understand that they need to abandon their constant demands in Kyiv, or rather in Brussels, where they are constantly trying to ensure that Hungary is cut off, separated from cheap Russian energy. As long as Ukraine continues to do this, then Ukraine, I must apologize, but I will say, is our enemy. Ukraine is violating our most fundamental interests by continuously demanding and inciting Brussels to disconnect Hungary from inexpensive Russian energy. Whoever does this is not Hungary's opponent, but its enemy. I'll tell you the numbers. If there's no Russian oil and gas, then all of us will pay these prices. Today, the average annual utility bill, I'm talking about the average, is 250,000 forints. But the Poles and Czechs have 800,000, even a million for serious matters. Your question, after all, is about how stable, organized, and secure Ukraine, the Ukrainian state, and the future of its army are. So should we really be afraid that a situation will arise where things in Ukraine get completely out of hand and slip from control, and that Ukraine will then pose a serious threat to Hungary with that monstrously large army of theirs, which you fattened up with European money, right? And they also make threats, because sometimes the commander there lets slip that they'll be in Budapest in I don't know how many hours, if it comes to that, right? These are the things our Ukrainian friends say, who, by the way, are asking for our vote. No, so the answer is that Ukraine's future remains unresolved. Whether the Russians will completely occupy Ukraine, or ultimately, what I personally wouldn't bet on will happen, that Ukraine and the Union together will defeat the Russians on the front line and push them back even to Moscow. Either an ungoverned territory will be created, another Afghanistan, or something of that nature. Regarding this, no one can say anything with certainty today. All I can tell you is that we face the least risk if we remain uninvolved in every such conflict taking place on Ukrainian territory, and at the same time we ensure our own reinforcement, for instance, financially. That is no accident. I don't wish to elaborate on this. It is no coincidence that Hungary has never possessed such substantial foreign currency reserves and gold reserves as it holds today.
It has a reason.
And never, never before has Hungary spent so much money on acquiring modern weapons and building up the army's capability to stop anyone who would turn against Hungary.